Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Jewelers Academy podcast. My name's Ellen. I'm a jewellery designer and maker based in beautiful Bristol. And today on the podcast, I am joined by Lou Chudley from Spark Social. So, Lou is an Instagram specialist helping businesses get visible on Instagram by running Instagram workshops, online courses, and one to one training sessions. I think lots of people are feeling a little bit overwhelmed with Instagram at the moment. I might even say a bit fed up, particularly where there have been some recent changes with things like the format of pictures, reels. You can now make longer reels, and there's various other kind of things that have been happening, probably even just in the past couple of weeks. So I wanted to talk to Lou really about what's working on Instagram in 2025. I'm hoping this will maybe re-inspire you to post on Instagram and give you some really easy but engaging content ideas that you can do as well. So, welcome, Lou.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining me. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Brilliant. Thank you. So I'm also based in Bristol and I run a business called Spark Social. And I work with mainly small businesses and lots of creative businesses, helping them to just get the most out of using Instagram. And Instagram is the only platform that I work with. My kind of first foray into social media, I was like a general social media manager and realized Instagram was the platform that I loved the most. And I've been doing this, training people solely on Instagram since 2019.
Fab. That sounds great. And I think certainly for a lot of jewelers and small business owners, Instagram feels like quite a natural home because certainly when it started, it was all about beautiful visuals. But I'm also conscious that things have changed. And as we mentioned earlier, sometimes it can feel like you've just got the hang of stuff and then it
Yeah.
all goes up in the air again. So I mean, I guess my first question is just about, is it still a good marketing tool in 2025? Is this, should we still be spending time on it?
I think absolutely. It is still, one of the best places that you can be if you're a small business owner and you're wanting to connect with your audience, tell people about what you do, and try to convert those followers, that community, into buyers. And I think if you think about the way, even if you've been on Instagram a long time, think about the way businesses have traditionally tried to market to their customers. And it was always very at arm's length. And I think what the advent of Instagram has done for small businesses is to be able to bring the customer and the business much closer together. And that ability to be able to connect directly with your customer on a platform that's free. I think for any small business not using Instagram, I think they're doing themselves a disservice.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think I always try and remember that when I'm feeling a bit fed up with it myself, is that this is a free tool.
Yeah.
And 20 years ago, you wouldn't have had this ability to connect with your customers. The fact that you can direct message customers, you can answer queries, you can share stuff. There is still something quite magical about it, I think. It's just sometimes it's refinding that inspiration, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think, by any standards, Instagram has now been around for nearly 15 years. And if you've been on the platform since that time, I don't know about you, Ellen, I arrived probably late 2016. So after Instagram stories arrived, and, it's completely unrecognizable from the platform it started as with these square photos and funny filters. And as it, excuse me, as it's evolved, new opportunities have arisen for businesses to use it to connect with their audience. But also, what comes with that is complexity, overwhelm, trying to keep up with trends. Is it video? Is it not? One of the new things that Instagram has launched over the last few days, and it's probably really pertinent that we're doing this podcast now because just in the, bearing in mind it's what, the 20th of January, just in the last 4 days, they've updated and released about 7 quite major changes to the platform. One of which is that reels are now going to be up to 3 minutes long. So if you've been around, on the platform as long as I have, there used to be a thing called IGTV, which was the long form video format. And then that disappeared, replaced by reels, which initially were 15 seconds, then 30, then 60, then 90. And now they're going back to 3 minutes. So, but I think what that tells us is how important video is, how important video content is. So I think, yeah, I know lots of people's heads will be spinning at this point in the year But in spite of that, I think if you can get over these hurdles of, kind of getting up to date with what the latest form of Instagram is, I think it is still a brilliant place for you to, particularly for, the jewelry community, creative businesses who can really not just show your beautiful products, your end result, but actually that process. I think, I know we'll probably talk about this in more detail, but that process is everything, being able to show your craft and your skills and your expertise so people understand the value of your work. I think Instagram can't really be surpassed for that ability to do that.
Yeah, that's so important, isn't it? I mean, you touched on there about the Instagram Reels now can be up to 3 minutes, but do you want to maybe just take us through some of those changes that have
Yeah.
happened in the past few days? It would be really
Sure.
useful to understand them.
Okay. Go through the big checklist. Um, so the kind of earliest change last week was a really good update. I don't know if you ever use this feature where you can invite collaborators to your posts, which I think is a really great feature. It's a great way of where you can kind of reach further into your audience with people that you just might not able to reach if you weren't collaborating with another account. And that's where you're literally kind of tagging and inviting in another account to share that post. And the same post sits on both your feeds, both your grids.
Mhm.
Looks exactly the same. But now you can actually invite a collaborator retrospectively. So it could have been a post you shared weeks or months ago, and you can now invite a collaborator, which I think is a really great feature because also when that new collaborator accepts the invitation, it goes to the front of their feed, the front of their grid, which is great.
Right.
So, in terms of the big updates that came out this weekend, the biggie was that your profile would have changed. I don't know if is yours updated.
It has, yeah.
Yeah. So, traditionally, obviously, for the last 15 years, the preview grid on your profile has been square. And up until a few years ago, people would still be sharing square images. But since I've been running Spark Social in 2019, I've been encouraging people to share portrait size, rectangular sized images, just because it takes up more space on your phone. So it just gets more attention. But Instagram have now rolled out a portrait sized preview grid. So when you open your Instagram, everything on the grid is rectangular. And that has been quite discombobulating, I think, for a lot of people. So used to seeing those squares. So what it means is if you've been posting portrait size images, reels, you'll be fine. It will fit fine in that new preview pane. But if you've still been posting squares and landscape, what you're going to find is, particularly if you are sharing posts that there's graphics and text on, bits of those are going to be squished and, you're going to lose some of that text on the left and the right margins. There are some workarounds where you can adjust the image and, you can fill it with a bit of black or white background, but it's not ideal. But that's a massive change, I think, and quite a shift in people's minds in terms of how they think about content. The other update, ones that haven't been rolled out so far, are that you're going to be able to move your grid tiles around. So at the moment, you can pin 3 posts to the top of the grid, which I love, which is a way of just kind of having headlines. But they haven't quite said when this is going to get rolled out, but you're going to be able to actually move your posts, a bit like a mosaic, and move posts around and, have something that was 6 months ago and move that to the top without actually having to pin it. So I don't have that yet. It's not been rolled out. So I think until it's rolled out, I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. But I think it could be useful. Another update is that you'll be able to post directly to your grid without it going to the feed, which is a funny one because I think we all naturally feel like anything we post, we want it to reach as many of, our audience and non-followers. And this is a way of just posting something directly to the grid. So I think, again, interesting to see how that plays out. And then the other biggie is that highlight folders, which currently sit in between your profile bio and your feed preview, they're going to be moving into their own tab. Instagram haven't said when that's going to roll out, but it will be soon enough. And this is the thing with Instagram. I think unless you're following somebody, me or somebody like me, an Instagram specialist who is constantly looking for these updates, they just don't tell you, which I think is what is, it's quite difficult, isn't it, for a small business owner who is busy, working their business to suddenly have everything change. And then the other big bit of news is that Instagram are rolling out a new video editing app kind of outside of Instagram called, I think it's Edits, isn't it? I think it's Edits,
Mm.
which will launch in March. So they're kind of launching a bit of a wait list on the App Store. And that means you'll be able to edit video and do lots of things that you can't necessarily do in the editing suite in Reels. And ultimately, the biggest thing is that you'll be able to create video without an Instagram watermark. So you could post it anywhere. So, and lots of people think this is in response to what's happened in the US over the
Yeah.
weekend with TikTok being banned and then coming back to life, but also CapCut, as you know, because it's interlinked with TikTok. So yeah, it's a lot of updates in the space of a few days.
I mean, I'm guessing because of the emphasis now on video format, that is kind of the way things are going. Is that the sort of general view that actually it's going to fully move away from still images?
I don't know about moving away from still images. I think if Instagram moved away from it completely, I think they would see a lot of uproar. But I think it does lean into this idea of how compelling video is. And I think it's true. I think we all, I think the stat is that video content is 7 times more compelling than just a still image. But I think
Mm.
there's still a place for still images. And actually, carousel posts, and one of the updates last year was that you can now add up to 20 pieces of media within a carousel. People really love carousel posts. So I think, and I think for, the jewelry community, it's a great format for being able to show, kind of macro images, wider shots, detail, a bit of video. Carousel posts are still really popular and really engaged with. But I think, if you're not making video content, I think this is your nudge, a gentle nudge,
Yeah.
if I can, to say, start embracing it and see what you can start creating, because it's only going to gain more and more traction, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. And do you think, I mean, I suppose, again, for lots of small business owners, you're kind of concentrating on juggling a lot of things.
Mm.
And sometimes doing Instagram or any form of social media feels like, oh my gosh, it's yet another thing I've got to kind of try and master. I mean, do you feel like short snippets of video, so maybe even just kind of taking a video of something as you're working, I mean, is it worth doing that, or do they need to be really polished and professional?
No, I think, sometimes you're going to want to, create something that is more like portfolio content that you want, prospective customers to land on and, be really impressed by. But I think equally, there's a big space and demand for content that is less polished, that is more, has that feeling of ad hoc, because I think what your customers and buyers want to see is that process. And actually, that
Mm.
process isn't always shiny, and it can be messy and noisy, and I think people need to see that to help them to make those buying decisions. So I think one of the things I would really encourage your community is to get into this habit of filming as you go, and not just thinking, right, I've got to take nice photos of the end result of the beautiful jewelry you've made, but actually just getting into this habit of filming you as you work, because that, I think sometimes that's where I was going to say the gold happens, the magic happens. I need to move away from these jewelry analogies in my head, because people really enjoy seeing that content. And I know we talked briefly about this in the DM messages last night, that you had that story of you making the wax molds, that there is definitely something about the original audio that you capture when you're working, particularly in that kind of close-up format, and that people really enjoy hearing the sounds, the filing, the cutting, whatever it is that you might be doing. So, if you're not already capturing yourself, setting up getting a tripod, getting your
Mhm.
phone in there and just filming yourself, and just treat it as a bit of an experiment, make it a bit of creative fun, and seeing what you can capture, and just test things out. I think this is the thing with Instagram, even though it kind of can evolve quite quickly, I think the way that we as human beings enjoy consuming content, doesn't necessarily change. Yes, taste change, but actually, we're looking for things that kind of entertain us in a small
Mhm.
and I think that process, the jewelry making, I think also it makes it accessible to your customers, your buyers, if they can see, the work that's gone into the piece of jewelry that they end up with. So yeah, I think definitely I would encourage you to capture as much as possible, because also then you're going to end up with a really nice long bit of video that you can chop up, into a shorter video, into a longer video if you want to. But yeah, that, I think that's a habit I would really encourage in 2025.
Okay. That's really useful to know, because I think sometimes we maybe take for granted that making process, but actually, I know certainly when I've shared more kind of behind the scenes content, I think people do really respond to it well, because of course it's not obvious to someone else how you make a pair of
Exactly.
earrings or a chain or whatever it might be. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a useful thought, to maybe just keep your phone to hand and get
Yeah.
filming, even if it's not looking incredible and you haven't got a beautiful manicure.
Yeah, and I would say that if you've got marketing budget to get kit, I think I was thinking I've got my tripod over there. One of the best things to get is a tripod,
Mm.
that's sturdy enough, that's got, you can pick up the cradle for about, £7 on Amazon, and just have that there. So it's just another tool that you're using in the business. But I think it's a bit like being your future friend, getting into this habit of capturing footage that you might not use for months. And then suddenly you've got this back catalogue that you can go back to
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
haven't got something ready and they're waiting.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. So, again, I guess that kind of leads me on to my next question. We've touched on it a bit there, but how can we use Instagram more effectively for our businesses? I mean, we're sort of recognizing that yes, we definitely need to do it, but what's the most effective way of, or how should we
I think
prioritize it?
remembering that regardless of how many followers you've got, that you have to repeat your message. And I think that's, again, a bit like getting into this habit of video is we kind of think, right, I've said about this once, I've said about this new product, and it's a bestseller, and that's enough. And I do think it's a very British thing. I think if you looked at your kind of American counterparts, they have no worries about talking about what they're doing constantly. I think getting into this habit of repeating what you do, reminding people, even excuse me, if you think you've said it loads of times before, there's no way. You've just got to remember, I think the adage is, you're the only person that sees all your content on Instagram. So I think once you get your head over that, then actually talking about your products, your jewelry in lots of different ways becomes much easier. So I think, repeating yourself, repeating your message, but thinking about how you can talk about what you do in all those different formats. You've got stories, you've got reels, you've got carousel posts, you could go live, you could post it a single image. So I think getting into that mindset, really, leaning into video, I think showing up and being visible, and in saying that, I'm going to caveat that with, that doesn't mean you have to suddenly be making reels where you're singing and dancing and doing crazy transitions. And because I know probably for your community, they hear
Shame.
that and they're just like, no, no, thank you. But again, it's a bit of a cliche, but the adage I always use is that, imagine that, I know the last time I saw you, you were going off to London to do a market in London. And imagine you had all your beautiful jewelry on your market stall, wherever it might be, and you just hid under the table and you just hope people walk past and be like, oh, that's a beautiful pair of earrings, I'm going to buy it. It just wouldn't happen. Part of that connection you have is that conversation that people have with you. And I think you can only really invite that conversation when people at least get to meet you a little bit. So I think particularly using stories to, drive up that visibility. If you can, you know, be brave and get, some video content out there. If you're just talking about your work, I think people really want to hear from the accounts that they follow, the small businesses, and they want to get to know you just a little bit. And it's amazing how little you have to share about your life and where you work from for people to feel connected to you. And I think,
Mm.
people kind of talk about personal brand a lot, but I do think just letting people get to meet you as if they would if you were in a shop or a market store, I think is really, really important. And I think that's going to be just as important in 2025 as it was, in 2020.
Yeah.
So thinking about that visibility, and I think testing things out. If you feel like, well, you've done some reels and they don't really go anywhere and you don't get much traction, try something different. Maybe try some more behind the scenes, do some talkies, share some day in the life content, and just test things out and see where it lands.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really useful. I think sometimes we worry about getting it right or getting it perfect somehow, but actually, as you said, not everyone is sitting there waiting for you to post a reel or for you to
Yeah.
share a story. And so, actually, if something doesn't go that well, it really doesn't matter. You can just start
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
try something different.
And you can archive content. There's no, if you don't feel great about a piece of content you've posted, just archive it. But actually, in the end, I think we all worry so much about what our content looks like or what we sound or look like when we talk on reels and stories, but actually everybody else is worrying about
Yeah.
that about themselves. So I think just go for it, just get it out there and see what happens.
Yeah, that's useful. Thanks. And I mean, you touched on stories there. Is that now the best way to be seen? Because I'm conscious, I think for a lot of people, they feel like their reach has dropped probably over the past year or so. Are there any kind of tips you have for actually?
I think stories are as important as ever. I think the thing to remember is that your stories only go to your existing followers, whereas all the content that sits on your feed is permanent content that can reach far and wide. And particularly with reels, that's where we see the greatest reach. And, they can be really important for kind of growing your brand, but your stories just go to your existing followers, whether you've got 100 followers or, 20,000 followers. That's, who those stories are shown to. Obviously, anybody can come and find your story if they want to. But what that tells you is that that content is going to your best people on Instagram. Your followers are people who are following you because they like what you do. They've got to feel like they've got a connection with you. They're the people that are either customers, prospective customers, and even if they don't ever buy from you, they're people that are going to cheerlead you and support you and share you with their network.
Yeah.
So I think if you can use your stories to stay as close and connected to them, and the joy of stories is that it's ad hoc content. You don't doesn't have to be as polished. Those stories content expire after 24 hours. So really lean into that, and actually that's a place to show excuse me, that behind the scenes, talk about just other things. I like to talk about telly quite a lot, and that's what I'll do on stories. And, I'll probably get loads more engagement about talking about a film I watched or, a podcast I listened to than if I did some stories and said, I've got a new course coming up. Would you like to sign up?
Yeah.
But every time you post a story, it's like layers. And every time, people are just getting to know you a little bit more. And that connection is gold because then when you do talk about your business, it's like you're talking to a
Mm,
warmed up lead and you're not just going in cold. So I think if your listeners haven't been using their stories very much, I'd encourage you in 2025 to up the ante a bit on your stories because it's worth the time and energy that you spend on making those stories.
yeah, that's interesting. And so, does it feel like? I mean, to me, I suppose I've always understood stories, as you said, almost are a little bit more informal, and maybe that is where you share a little bit of personal stuff, or what's the best way of
Yeah,
getting about
I
things?
think I think sometimes people feel like there's slight confusion with reels and stories because they're both video format, they're both full screen, they look quite similar. But just remembering that reels kind of sit permanently on your feed and stories, unless you add to your highlight folders, will disappear after 24 hours. But think about all those different elements of stories. You could share photos, you can share video, you can share links, you can share your content, you can share other people's content. You've got all those interactive stickers, those polls.
Mhm.
Those polls are really, really effective at doing market research. If you think about for the jewelry community, getting your audience involved in, right, what design shall I go with? I've designed these two things. Which one do you prefer? To
Mm,
actually let the audience feel like they're a genuine part of the community. I think that's
mm.
really powerful for a potential buyer. And yeah, just, the kind of ad hoc nature of them means it can be very unpolished. If we think about back kind of 5 years ago to the pandemic, people showing up on stories in their trackies, not having brushed their hair for days, nobody cared. All people want is just that chance just to get a little glimpse of who you are and what you stand for, because I think that is important to people. I think users of Instagram, people who are looking to spend their money, they are much more savvy and sophisticated than they were kind of 5 years ago. So, just be mindful of that, I think, and the connections you make can be really powerful when it comes to then selling what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really useful way of thinking about it, I think, in terms of sort of engaging with people. I mean, is that the way that you would also recommend growing your audience? Because I think there was very sort of rapid growth to begin with, and lots of accounts found that
Mm.
they were, they were gaining lots and lots of followers, and that feels a bit like it slowed down. I don't know if that's something to do with the content or there's more people on it or.
I think it's the latter. I think what we saw in the pandemic with this huge influx of new people, so now there's 2 billion users. So
Mm.
that's a lot of people pumping out a lot of content. And actually, as humans, I think we don't have the capacity to even take in all the content from the accounts that we follow.
Yeah.
And also, interestingly, with the events unfolding in the US with TikTok, where were all those, if that ban had actually continued, where would all those creators have gone to? Instagram would probably be their natural home. So again, we would have seen an influx of users. I think one of the things that we will see in 2025 is more emphasis on Instagram SEO, so
Mm.
Instagram search engine optimization. I talked quite a lot about this last year. Um, so, people have been using hashtags for a very long time, but we're going to see probably the hashtags phased out and just replaced with keywords. And the algorithm is going to be looking for these keywords to help them to work out what that content is about and who they can show that to. So I think one thing I'd encourage, your listeners is to really, especially if you've done any SEO work for your websites, really think about those keywords that you're using on your website. Start to be bringing those into your Instagram, and there's, probably 7 or 8 different places that you can be adding those into. And every time you add those keywords in, it's going to help your prospective customers to find you far more easily, make your business more discoverable, but also at the same time, you're helping the algorithm to show you to more people too. So if you
Mm.
feel like your reach is lower, that you're not reaching as many of your audience and prospective customers, things like Instagram SEO, time and attention that you pay to that strategy is definitely going to help.
And so, would you recommend actually weaving some of those words into your into the sort of written element of your post, to the caption?
There's actually kind of 7 or 8 places on Instagram. So it's thinking about your Instagram name field, into your bio, your list of hashtags. So you can still use hashtags, but
Mm.
rather than the way people have used them traditionally up until now, where they can be quite generalist, you want to be very specific. So, for you as a jeweler, rather than just having like hashtag jeweler, actually
Mm.
thinking about, right, I think really the best way to explain it is like thinking how your customer would search for you and describe what you do, and be bringing those keywords in. So into your hashtags, into your alt text descriptions.
Okay.
Um, so your listeners are probably used to adding alt text and descriptions into the website, but you can do the same on Instagram as
Mhm.
well. Even the text that you have on your reels. So, the text on the covers, any labeling text that you have. And if you have a reel where it's got a spoken audible voice, the algorithm is picking up the language and the keywords in there as well. So, there's all these different places. And then of course, in the main body of your caption that you write. But I think bringing keywords into those captions that you write can be quite hard when you're also trying to be conversational and
Yes.
spark up a conversation. But that's why then adding them in all those other places means you're giving yourself the best shot of getting those keywords recognized as well.
Yes, yes. You don't want to make it sound too like too much like you've shoehorned in words to the caption, do you? So, okay, that's good to know they can go in other places
Yeah.
too. So, are there any kind of, I mean, we've talked about ways of getting seen and growing, but are there any common mistakes you see small businesses making with Instagram, things to avoid, maybe?
So, kind of specifics, and we kind of touched on this. I think if you are just kind of focusing in on one format over all the others, so if you just think, hate video, I'm just going to post static images. I think again, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice when you've got all these formats that you could try. So I would say try to have a mix of
Mhm.
content, because I think that keeps it interesting for people landing on your account. I think posting at least one reel a week and seeing where that takes you in terms of reach. I think if you're not using stories, I think that is a mistake, because you're again missing out on that connection. I think with the new updates that we're seeing, I think and I've been talking about this for a long time, if you're continuing to post square images, I think that's not best practice now. I would encourage you to post in that portrait dimensions. When it comes to your reels, making sure that you are using footage that is full screen and not landscape, or even portrait. It's got to be full screen, because otherwise you'll have those black borders
Yeah.
around it. Really thinking about, when you make your reels, the audio that you choose, and making sure you're not using audio tracks that have been really saturated. If you think about this kind of time last year, when that Beyonce track Texas Hold'em came out,
Yeah.
and you literally couldn't open your phone because you just hear the first few bars and you'd be like, nope, nope. And everybody was using it. So I think paying attention to trending audio, how many times an audio track's been used, and really thinking about it. And I think try not to be too swayed with trends. There are so many trends, and you can feel like, I've got to jump on this if my reel's going to be a success. And I think
Mhm.
make sure it's right for you and your business. Different trends work for different people, or don't be swayed by trends at all. Do what feels right for you, but pay attention to your insights, and actually, once every couple of weeks, have a look at your insights and think, right, okay, that bit of content did really well. What was it about that?
Mm.
And how can I then replicate that, into a different post, a different reel? I think pay attention to your insights, and things, basic things like, think about the text that you use. The fonts that Instagram offers you. There's a couple that are a bit bonkers. Like on both reels and stories. There's that neon one that,
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I need two pairs of glasses. So
Yes.
avoid it. Remember that people are scanning Instagram a lot of the time for the information that they want. And if you make your text too small, you're going to lose people's attention. Writing captions that are all one long rambling paragraph. Try to write in kind of bullet points, but on that, write like you sound. You don't want it to sound, like you were saying, robotic. And
Yeah.
write how you would actually talk, so people can actually hear your real tone of voice. I think that's a good best practice as well.
Okay, that's good to know. I mean, you touched on reels there and things like trending audio. Is it important to look for things like trending audio, or maybe music that not many people have used? Does that make
Yeah,
a
I think
difference?
paying attention to what's popular. So what Instagram will tell you now, when you go in to add the music on your reels, it will tell you what's trending, and it will also tell you what your followers are listening to as well,
Mm.
which is really interesting. If you're going to choose a trending audio track, or any track, you want a piece of audio that's not been used too many times. So Instagram will tell you how many times it's been used, and if it's trending, when you're looking at music, you'll see that kind of diagonal upward pointing arrow, which denotes it's trending. And I would say anything under 100,000 uses is fine.
Okay.
Anything over that, then it's just probably kind of reached its peak and it's about to drop off the edge. So do pay attention to the audio that you think will work. And sometimes I think it's quite good, just once a day, just have a bit of a mindless scroll through your reels tab, because remembering that's content from accounts that you don't follow, that the algorithm thinks that you might like. And I think that's a great way of searching for audio, because it could be spoken audio, it could be music, it could be some ASMR. And just get saving, because the thing is, there's so many original artists on Instagram, there's no way you're going to remember. So get into the habit of saving, so then when you come to make your reel, you've got your saved collection to go to.
That sounds sensible. So you can just tap into that and
Yeah,
choose
yeah.
something. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So we are going to come on to the kind of second element of our discussion today, which is the kind of practical side of things. I guess this is a bit I'm probably going to need a pen for, because I should be writing down some of these ideas. But you were going to share some easy content
Yeah.
ideas with us.
I made a little list here. I thought, I'm never going to remember myself. So I think number one, and especially if your listeners haven't been doing this, but we talked about this at the start, is getting to this habit of filming you at work, and it could be over a series of days, getting that tripod set up, and so that you can then showcase your process. And that could be video content where you're keeping in the original sounds, or maybe you can do a voiceover over the
Mhm.
top. I think voiceovers really lend itself to, especially to jewelers, being able to kind of describe the intricate work that might be taking place. And also, I think voiceover content kind of elevates the quality of it. It makes it feel
Mhm.
really professional, I think. But
Mhm.
just remember, And in fact, this is probably one of the mistake things I should have mentioned, that if you're going to have voiceover, make sure, or even if it's somebody can see you talking, have those captions. The
Yeah,
caption sticker is there to add those all important subtitles. Some people are watching with the sound off by choice, and you will have people who are deaf and hearing impaired, and you want to make sure it's accessible.
sure.
So I think showcasing that process, and any one piece of behind the scenes, you could be turning that into 3 or 4 different reels. It could be a very short bit of, things being filed and melded and whatever it might be. It could be a voiceover. You could even do a green screen. I don't know if you've ever done a green screen reel before. I love a green screen personally. Or, putting, a whole week's worth of behind the scenes into a reel, and just find a really nice, audio track. Um, Using the Reels templates. I think the Reels templates can be really helpful particularly when it's an audio track where there's like a really definite beat, a tempo, a beat change,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
media changes in time to the tempo. And I think for jewelers, actually, that's a really nice, easy format to use, that you can be showcasing, your showcase your best sellers, or, work that's coming up, or, an exhibition you might have had. And because they're usually quite short, probably under
Mhm.
maybe, 20, 30 seconds, and really nice and easy to use. So talking about your best sellers, I think that's something, a reel that you can be making, or it doesn't have to be a reel, it could be a carousel, where, you've got a collection of work that you could be showing almost in kind of like catalog portfolio style.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a great one then. And actually a good example of one that you could pin to the top, or, when this new feature comes in, that you can just move it to the top and move it
Mhm.
back when you want to be talking about different bestsellers. But I think customers need to be reminded of what you have got on offer,
Yes.
how much it is, how they can buy from you. And I think those are 3 questions that any business needs to remember they need to do on Instagram: is what is it that you do, how you can help people, and how they can buy from you. And I
Mhm.
think often those things get forgotten, and they're
Yeah.
so important if you want people to buy from you. Close-up details. I think people are fascinated with how you make your jewelry. They want to see that detail. What tools do you use? And if you can capture those original sounds, people just love it. People. I don't even know what the science is, but it's just ASMR, isn't it? A couple of years ago, I worked with a furniture maker. So it was all, making furniture out of wood. And there'd be videos of people planing the wood and
Mhm.
sanding, and, things that you just think, this is bonkers. Why would somebody want to watch it? But people just love that
I
process.
totally get that, yeah.
And I think, when you've got it with, some nice audio, it can be very hypnotic, and, people just love that content. Before and after. So, creating, carousels and reels where you've got, maybe the raw materials of your jewelry, and then the beautiful end result. People love whatever business you're in. If you can show a transformation, people just love that. A day in the life. I think a
Yeah.
day in the life is a
Yeah, yeah.
really nice insight to you, as a jeweler. And you're probably thinking, well, I'm in this kind of space all day, just huddled over, metals. But actually, bring people in. Use your Instagram to bring people into your world. And I think that really drives up conversations and connections. And that's the way, we all want to use Instagram, I think.
Yeah.
So I think that's about 6 or 7 ideas kind of off the top of my head this morning that I thought, the jewelry community could definitely do. And those are achievable as well. I think there's nothing there that is complicated and difficult. It's just, maybe making more video and getting into these new habits, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all those things that are quite easy to do, particularly for small business owners, I guess, who are also making products.
Yeah.
It just makes it so much easier to be able to come up with a little piece of content to share, rather than feeling like you've got to set aside a whole day to film
Yeah.
stuff or
Yeah.
put photos together.
Because as much as Instagram is an important part of your marketing machine, you've also got your day-to-day running of your business, and you don't want it to take over.
Mm,
It's just getting that balance, I think, of, thinking, well, I need to make this content. Some people like batch, content making, but I'd
yeah,
say, I think, for small businesses, particularly creative business jewelers, I think seizing on those opportunities when you've got them, when you are making, you are creating jewelry, just remembering to capture, particularly when you're making bespoke one-off items as well,
Yeah.
things, designs that might not be replicated again, once it's gone, it's gone. So I think, remembering to capture it as you go.
Yes, yes, that's very good advice. I always forget to take a nice photo or a video of a bespoke piece, and
Yeah.
it's out of the workshop and gone forever. Yeah, yeah. That's brilliant. Well, thank you so much. It was so useful just to, I mean, firstly, to understand some of those changes. I think talking to you about them, they feel a bit less scary than maybe they did beforehand. But also, thanks for sharing the content ideas. I'm definitely going to go and record myself filing something in a minute.
Brilliant. And I think, what, to say on all those changes, that I think it's good advice to think, okay, all these new things are coming in, but you don't have to do them all at once. Just try to understand them. Obviously the new preview grid, that's going to be a change for everybody, but all those other things, just, take it piecemeal, one step at a time. You don't have to do everything that Instagram offers you. So yeah, trying to stay calm is
Yeah,
definitely the best thing to do.
thank you. So, Lou, I know you've got a Instagram course for artists and makers coming up. I wondered if you just wanted to quickly tell us a bit about that and also just share where we can find you online.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Ellen. So in March, I have a new online course. It's a 4-week online course coming up. It'll be running from the 4th to the 27th of March. And it will comprise of 2 live sessions a week. There'll be a live learning session on a Tuesday, and then a Q&A session on a Thursday. And over the 4 weeks, the idea is that I'm going to take you kind of through all the parts of Instagram that you need to understand and get confident with, so that you can be getting the most out of using Instagram. And I'd love to have you join us. We start on the 3rd of March, and if you'd like any more info, you can find me all the info at my website, which is www.spark/social.co.uk, and you can find me on Instagram at spark_social.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you. So we'll add those links to the show notes just in case you didn't get a chance to write them down. Thank you, Lou. Thanks so much for joining me. And thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful rest of week. All right. Bye.